before Australia ever argued about guilt or innocence. Before headlines and courtrooms and opinions, there was one quiet winter night at Uluru where a young family believed they were completely safe, surrounded by tourists, campfires, and the kind of stillness that makes the desert feel timeless. And in that moment no one imagined they were about to witness a sentence that would echo through the country for decades. Because when Lindy Chamberlain stepped out of her tent and said, "A dingo's got my baby," those 6 words didn't just describe what she believed had happened. They triggered something far bigger, something deeply uncomfortable, a national disbelief that began instantly and never truly stopped. It was August 1980. Lindy and her husband Michael were camping with their 3 children near Uluru, a place Australians trusted, respected, and underestimated all at once. Their youngest, 9-week-old Azaria, had been sleeping in the tent while the family shared a normal evening nearby. Conversations, food, familiar sounds, nothing dramatic, nothing unusual, until Lindy returned and the tent was empty. No cry, no movement, no child, only a silence so sharp it felt unnatural. She screamed for help and said what her mind could process in that split second, that a dingo had taken her baby. And while rangers and police responded quickly and searches began under floodlights across red sand and scrub, something else was already forming beneath the surface: doubt. Because Australia knew dingoes existed but couldn't accept that one could do this. And when people can't accept a reality, they begin reshaping it. The story quietly shifted, away from the wilderness and toward the woman standing in the middle of it. People noticed how she spoke, how she stood, how she grieved, and instead of seeing shock they saw something they couldn't label, which made them suspicious. Newspapers questioned her reactions, commentators speculated, and slowly the question stopped being "Where is the baby?" and became "What if the mother is lying?" And that moment, that single turn in perception, would set off one of the most disturbing miscarriages of justice in Australian history, not because of what was proven, but because of what people believed they already knew about mothers, about nature, and about what they thought could never happen in a place they thought they understood. And as the desert kept its silence, Australia began telling itself a story it would later regret. Chapter 2. When evidence spoke louder than truth, the moment Australia decided it didn't believe Lindy Chamberlain, every detail stopped being neutral and started being interpreted. Because once a story locks onto a villain, even facts begin to bend. Investigators focused heavily on forensic evidence found near the tent, including what they believed were traces of blood inside the family car, a conclusion that sounded definitive to the public and devastating for Lindy. But science in 1980 was limited. Testing methods were far less precise than people realized, and no one wanted to hear uncertainty when certainty made the story cleaner. Prosecutors argued that Azaria had been harmed inside the car and that the dingo story was a cover, while defense experts warned that the so-called blood could also be sound-deadening material, a common substance used in vehicles at the time. Yet those warnings barely made headlines, because by now the media narrative had momentum. Newspapers published diagrams, television panels debated Lindy's personality, her religion, her calmness, even the way she dressed, as if grief followed a single acceptable script. And when Azaria's small jacket was later found near a dingo den, damaged in a way consistent with animal activity, it should have shifted the conversation. But instead it was questioned, delayed, minimized, explained away, because doubt had already chosen its direction. And when the case went to court in 1982, Lindy wasn't just defending herself against evidence, she was defending herself against a country that had already made up its mind. The jury heard complex forensic testimony, delivered with confidence rather than caution. And confidence sounds like truth when people are desperate for closure. Lindy Chamberlain was convicted and sentenced to prison, a mother separated from her children not because the facts were beyond doubt, but because doubt itself had been assigned only one possible meaning. And as she was led away, Australia told itself the case was closed, unaware that the story was about to unravel in a way that would force the nation to confront an uncomfortable question, not about dingoes, but about how easily belief can overpower reality. Years after the courtroom doors closed and the headlines moved on, the desert spoke again, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly enough to change everything. In 1986, climbers discovered Azaria's matinee jacket near Uluru, close to a known dingo lair. And this time the evidence could not be brushed aside. The condition of the clothing matched what wildlife experts had always said was possible, a quiet confirmation that the wilderness had told the truth from the beginning. New inquests followed, scientific assumptions were re-examined, the so-called blood evidence was finally acknowledged as flawed, and what once sounded certain was exposed as misunderstood. Lindy Chamberlain was released, her conviction overturned, And in 2012, decades after the night that changed her life, a coronial finding officially ruled that Lindy Chamberlain died as a result of a dingo attack, a conclusion that should have ended the story but instead left a deeper question behind. How did a nation known for fairness, skepticism, and resilience get it so wrong for so long? The answer sits uncomfortably in the space between fear and certainty, because when people decide what they believe before the facts are complete, truth becomes optional. And Lindy's story is not just about loss or justice delayed. It is a warning about what happens when media noise drowns out patience, when confidence replaces humility, and when a human being becomes a symbol instead of a person. Today the phrase, "a dingo's got my baby," still echoes through Australian culture, but behind it is a real family, a real child, and a lesson written in red desert sand, that nature doesn't follow our rules and neither does grief. And if this story made you pause, if it challenged what you thought you knew, then share it. Subscribe for more real Australian stories told with honesty and care. And remember, the most dangerous assumptions are the ones we never question.